What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's another beautiful day to talk about film. I'm your host, Carson Higgins, along my co-host here, Groot, as always. And we're here to talk about this week's Film Club pick. Did you get a chance to watch the 101st flick on our list, Nostalghia, or Nostalgia, by Andrei Tarkovsky? Did you get a chance to check that out? I'm really glad we got a chance to watch it. I'm particularly pleased with its symbolic submission as the 101st film. Our very first film that we ever watched was Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky, his 1979 masterpiece. If you have not seen that, but you did watch this, whew, I'm proud of you. The film you just watched, if you did watch Nostalgia, we're going to call it Nostalgia. It's easier to say. But there is that H in the spelling, so I guess it is officially Nostalgia, but who cares? Nostalgia. It is a later Tarkovsky film. It's his second to last film he ever made. The first film he made outside of Russia, and it is kind of amongst the Tarkovskyites, if there is such a thing, which they're not called that, but it is definitely a thing. People love Andrei Tarkovsky. This is one of the lesser known masterpieces in his career. That's only 7 films long. He only made 7 films, I believe. So there's not really a whole lot to go on, but it's kind of interesting that this one in particular has gotten a little less of the limelight just because some of his other films stand so tall. We've watched some of the others in this club. Not only did we watch Stalker, we also watched Andrei Rublev, and we watched Mirror. I don't know if you've ever seen Solaris before, but that's another big Tarkovsky title. He is a giant. If there was a Mount Rushmore of directors, he'd probably be on it. Ingmar Bergman has been quoted as calling Tarkovsky the greatest among us, and that he invented a new film language that shows life as a reflection or as a dream, which we do see quite a bit in this film, which we'll break down in just a second, because there are some interesting things that are worth noting before you get into like what's the movie about. Because with a lot of Tarkovsky movies, especially upon one viewing, it's kind of tough to go ahead and say what was it about. I tell people, I watched this movie last night with my girlfriend and my mom, and I told them, I was like, you need to kind of bring the amount of patience, awareness, and presence that you would bring to like a poetry reading, or if you were going to read some classic Russian literature, because that's kind of what he demands of his audience. Tarkovsky wrote a book that basically helps people understand his films, because he got so many letters from fans and otherwise that just complained about not being able to know what his movies were about. And so he made a book called Sculpting in Time, one that I haven't read but would love to read. And there's a great documentary called Directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, or Directed by Tarkovsky, one of those. It's on the Criterion channel, at least for now. But you could seek that out. And it was filmed while he was making his final film, The Sacrifice, which was only 3 years later after this. And then he died. So there you go. That's the 3-minute version of who he is. I couldn't begin to tell you too much about him, because I don't want to claim to be some kind of Tarkovsky scholar. I'm definitely not. But let's dive into where this film kind of lands in his filmography. So Andrei Rublev is his second film. So that's where, as far as in his chronological order, we've seen his second film and now his second to last film. And it is notable that he made it outside of Russia. He had some trouble with the government and the censors there in the formerly USSR. And so he did leave and he went to go make this film. However, he grappled with this feeling of homesickness, which anyone that's ever moved away from home, if you have an established home, maybe you've felt that feeling yourself. So it is interesting to say that you have this poetic filmmaker in Andrei Tarkovsky who is making a film about a poet in Italy who is doing research on a Russian music composer who left Russia, went to Italy, missed Russia terribly, wound up going back to Russia, and killed himself there. The composer, just so you know, is someone that was invented for this film. I guess he was loosely based on a real composer, but the man that they're referring to throughout Nostalgia is someone that does not exist. But the layers that are present just in the, like, so before you even start to get into, well, what's that movie about? It is really important to know this stuff about the director and where he was, and that he was himself a poetic artist in exile, grappling with homesickness, and he made a film about that. There's a famous shot towards the end. Maybe some of you have seen the shot or at least know the reference, but it's of the candle flame. It's this 9-minute shot, or 9 and some seconds. It's a long take, but we'll get to that in a moment. We will visit the candle at the end. Candles are kind of present throughout this film. Like many other Tarkovsky films, I will say they are kind of jam-packed with symbolism. A lot of it goes over my head, simply because I don't know what they're referencing. A lot of times he's referencing things that are like deeply intrinsic to Russian culture, and especially like knowledge around, you know, I don't even, besides just artists and political figures, also just the knowledge of through the church, and then the saints, and then also dealing with once the USSR was nationally agnostic or whatever, atheistic, I forget, to kind of grapple as a citizen of Russia with being like, but I'm kind of a spiritual person and now it's been taken away from me. I am definitely getting off course a little bit and going into some territory that I don't know a whole lot about. So I'm just gonna kind of let you go ahead and do some research on your own, but let's break down some of the stuff in this film. I love Tarkovsky's long shots. He has so many of them in all of his films, and some really great ones are present in this film. I will say something that I find to be present in almost all of his films is since we as an audience are so tuned now to how we ingest cinema by way of clever cutting and just the way that stories are told to us. So, and I don't say this like it's a bad word, but formulaically, when you sit to watch a Tarkovsky film, you kind of have to come in with almost a little bit more of yourself, kind of like you're going into a spiritual church or something. You're visiting an ancient temple, and you need to kind of open your spirit up, not even your heart or your mind. You need to open your spirit up to really kind of be the antenna for what he's sending to us, because it is that, I'm sorry to say, it's like he is that stuffy cinephile director where it's kind of like hardcore movie people love Tarkovsky. Your average movie-going audience member, has probably never heard of him, and if you showed them a film of his, would be like, this is incredibly boring, nothing happens. How is this person famous? But it's getting into the symbolism and getting into the pace, and he, like I mentioned earlier, the sculpting in time notion. There are clips of him talking about it. So though I haven't read the book, and maybe you haven't either, you can watch interviews of him talk about this. But he talks about how cinema as an art form is uniquely set up to experience time. When you have a shot that is not cut, and it is this prolonged moment, you capture real time, realistic time, time as it is experienced by us at all points of our lives. So dealing with these long takes, and he'll slowly zoom, there's the slowest zoom or the slowest pan, and we'll wind up looking at a puddle with maybe voiceover, maybe not, or we'll slowly zoom in on a bottle that is collecting rainwater with sporadic moments of Domenico, who I haven't even brought up yet, speaking. Yeah, let's go into a little bit of the story. So you have our poet who is there researching the composer, this Russian composer. He is with a translator, this beautiful young woman, Eugenia, and the two of them are staying at like some hotel somewhere, and she's with him on this journey to kind of collect information about this composer that he's curious about. We do also kind of have these black and white intercut memories or dreams of home and Russia. There's this great shot where Eugenia kind of like moves her hair in a way, and then we cut and see who you find out later is Andrei. I haven't said his name. The poet who we're following, his name is Andrei. But we see his wife for a moment, and there's just kind of this back and forth where it is interesting how in real life, you know, a small gesture like that will instantly kind of put you in some other time and place, that deja vu moment. But yeah, so while you do have those black and white intercut things, we have these two individuals on this little journey, and Andrei becomes fascinated with this like local madman who doesn't really seem all that mad. But as we get to know him, we kind of find out that he has done some pretty out there things. But he becomes fascinated with this guy, Domenico. And the actor who plays him does a spectacular job. I'm so excited to watch The Sacrifice, which is Tarkovsky's next and final film, because he's the lead in that. And so I'm like, yeah, show me more of that guy. He's amazing. But yeah, no, there's this great scene where Andrei's trying to get Eugenia to like get Domenico to have lunch with him, and we just kind of see the two of them at the door, and he tells her to go talk to him, and the camera moves with her to go talk to Domenico, and the camera follows her back to be like, he doesn't want to come. And this back and forth happens. And anytime that Tarkovsky's dealing with shots like that, I'm always just kind of like, this is great. I like his real time. I like his long takes. I like that he doesn't cut. I think it's beautiful. So let's get to the big no cut, the big long take. I'll set it up a little bit. Domenico tells Andrei, once they do hang out for a little while, tells him how he wants to have this lit candle and wade through the pool of St. Catherine and keep it lit. And if he does that, he'll save the world. And so he at the end of this conversation, which is very long with a lot of long silences and all that wonderful Tarkovsky stuff, he gives him the candle and he says, take this with you and like, do it. You light it and walk it through the pool. There's also a great shot at that pool earlier where the camera just kind of wraps us all the way around and then into it and back out and around again. It's the patience and the confidence and the trust that Tarkovsky has in his audience is often too long a leash, but I appreciate that he gives it to us, because sometimes when we aren't distracted, we earn the beautifully meditative stuff that he presents to us. But yeah, so this thing with the candle happens, and then much later in the film, spoiler alert, Domenico is giving this. He's speaking in this square in Rome, and there's all these other guys standing around, and he's giving kind of this apocalypse speech. And he winds up lighting himself on fire, so he kind of becomes the candle in that instance, and it's so shocking and eerie and weird because he's set it up to where when he does that, some of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony will play, but like the record is skipping and stuff. So you have the image of him burning himself with this music kind of going in and out, and then finally cutting out entirely to just him screaming, and it is so fucked up. But at the end of, if you stick with it, right? It's the juice is always worth the squeeze with this guy. If you stick with it, and you get all the way to this moment, it can have profound effect. So, this big long take that I keep referencing. Andrei revisits the pool. He brings the candle. The pool is for some reason drained now. And he sets out to do the walk. Mind you, there's just puddles and loose ground. It's no longer a pool. But he lights the candle, makes it about halfway, it goes out, walks back, lights it again, does it again, it goes out, walks back, lights it again, continues the journey all the way finally to the other end, puts the candle up, we pan away, and we're left with just the candle. I saved you 9 minutes, but I didn't actually save you anything. You deserve to sit with that, because I read this great thing. the actor, and I forget his name, forgive me. He's also in Mirror, one of the other Tarkovsky films we watched. But he was told by Tarkovsky before they started filming or anything, he was like, I have this idea for this shot where I think I can show an entire life of a human being in one unbroken take. And he talked about how in like Orthodox temples or something, that flickering candles and just this imagery. And he was like, if we can achieve this shot that I have in mind, it will be the greatest work of my career. And will give like cinematic voice to a human life. So this you kind of light your candle at home base. This is my interpretation of it. And as you bring your flame with you into the world, the wind and the rain and the world around you can extinguish your flame. And by returning home, you can get the flame back. And so it is all a little kind of on the head, on the surface a little bit, but it is beautiful. Similarly, there's a shot not too much earlier in the film where there's rain coming into this dilapidated building, and this lonely feather comes and falls in a pool. And this isolated, individualistic thing that Tarkovsky's working with is just stupendous. Yeah, there's a great YouTube video that I found actually that breaks down this 9-minute shot of this candle. And if you watched the film and you found that it either was completely perplexing and you hated it and it was slow and nothing happens, like the New York Times review of this film on Rotten Tomatoes is 2 words. It's a rotten splatter and it says nothing happens. And I was just like, man, what a simplistic viewpoint on this very complex film that also has like pretty surface symbols within it. But this 9-minute candle scene is profound and is deeply affecting. So yeah, I mean, you could talk about Tarkovsky a lot. I clearly have almost talked about him for 20 minutes. And so if you did stick with me this whole time, God, I'm proud of you. And I'm really thankful that you made it. Yeah, we're gonna have a new pick up tomorrow. And you know, like I've said before, if you're watching this in the future, the new pick tomorrow thing doesn't really affect you, but there will be a new pick. And I'm excited to put it up there tomorrow. And in the meantime, me and Groot are gonna go back to enjoying ourselves. I hope you enjoyed Nostalghia. And if you are so inclined, go check out some of those other Tarkovsky films that we watched earlier. Stalker is a great place to start. It's where this entire club began. I will say again, though, you know, bring everything you need for a nice, patient, seated, contemplative, meditative experience, because that's what you're gonna get. But it's always I already said this, but the juice is always worth the squeeze with this guy. Stick it out and you'll get something out of it. So anyway, farewell. Hope to see you again soon. And yeah, shout out to everybody that made it to the end of this video. Proud of you. Love you guys.